You are listening to Abnormal Spaces.
I'm Donnie.
I'm Ryan.
In this podcast, we discuss conceptual realities, the researchers, authors, and explorers who describe and define them, as well as our personal experiences in these abnormal spaces. In this episode, we discuss Hans Kennis and his experiments with instrumental transcommunication. Using various methods, he and others like him have been able to receive information and even capture images relating to the thoughts, emotions, and histories the experimenters were working with. I'm wondering if you discovered this Hans Kennis when we were researching the water episode. Did you already know about Hans Kennis before that, or was that something that you discovered while you were looking like at Veda Austin stuff?
I have no idea.
Okay.
The only thing I remember about it is showing Sabin pictures in the car somewhere. We were like parked, and I was like, "Look at this! It's real." And she's like, "Whoa, that's pretty wild." And I'm like, "No, this is like the craziest thing you've ever seen, probably." And she's like, "No, probably not, but it's really cool." And I'm like, "No, but it's really crazy."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so when you sent me the link, and I started checking out that website, and it's so vast. All the different things that this Hans Kennis, who is a parapsychologist born in 1947, still alive, I think. But anyway, really inclusive of a lot of different ways to try and communicate intradimensionally. And, we've talked a lot about different planes of existence and like different vibrational energies, etc. And so this really ties into a lot of that. But what's neat to me, anyway, was that there were so many different ways that Hans and his crew and the people that are familiar with him, all of the different ways that they've tried to capture either images or audio recordings or, whatever they could to prove that, one, there are other dimensions around us at all times. And two, if we allow ourselves to communicate, then we can. And it's kind of that simple. You have to allow yourself to do it. And then when you do, you can see it or hear it or whatever.
Yeah, totally. It reminds me a lot of seeing sculpture in marble or something like that, but even more acute than that, because some of these photographs are like photographs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no like saying, "Oh, that could be something else."
Right.
It's like, no, that's a kid. That's a kid.
Yeah.
Or that's a whatever,
Yeah. A few of them were kind of a stretch and took a lot of imagination, but others I was like, okay, this, it almost seemed
fake.
It seemed too real to be true.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a link on the website that directs you to a YouTube video where this guy who is kind of a channeler, and I can't remember his name, but he channels via like digital photography. And they wanted to demonstrate that nobody was altering these images. And what they did was they set up a couple of cameras on him. They brought their own digital camera. They brought their own SD card that was encrypted in a way that it couldn't be manipulated. And then he just stood in front of this blue curtain, like navy blue curtain, and just started taking pictures. There were a few of them that were really eerie. Mm-hmm. And okay, so stuff happens, a particle flies in front of the lens and the light reflects refracts off of it or whatever and, creates these distortions, sure. But then there are some that were really bizarre, and one of them in particular was the face of some Swedish paranormal researcher or something. Anyway, so I'm watching this and I'm like, man, this seems pretty hokey, but I can't deny it because they were there. And unless the whole setup is a fraud, then I have to believe that nothing was really altered. And what's really weird is there's a period where the guy looks up at the ceiling and there's nothing, they're just in a regular room and there's nothing on the ceiling. And then he looks over at one of the cameras and all of a sudden that camera goes like really dark. It doesn't totally go black, but it darkens. And he says to another person in the room, he's like, do you see that over there? And they're like, what? And he's like, there's something around that camera. And then it like goes away and fades back in. And I was really struck because I thought, man, if this is a hoax, this is very elaborate. Like,
I just, this Hans Kennis guy, like, he spent 50 years studying this shit. So I can't, can anything happen? Of course. But can you also go upstairs and grab a bowl and try it for yourself? Yes, you can.
Yeah.
And you'll probably find the same thing.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the conclusion that he's come to. He's like, ITC is just a way of photographing basically the quantum field.
Yeah.
And it's kind of imperfect because nobody has really figured out how to get like super consistent, clear images.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of different ways to do it, like you can point it at a TV that's not even turned on.
Yeah.
Like a camera. There's the Polaroid thing where like people will just hold a Polaroid camera and transfer thought to it. Crazy as shit.
Yeah.
And there's a few more ways too that are on there, but the main one being water. The way he does it is a glass, like kind of like a Pyrex bowl with a sheet of aluminum foil underneath. And then it takes a light and kind of puts it at a 45-degree angle off to the side and a camera over top, like shooting down over the water, and agitates the water with like a spatula or something. Some people just shake they'll just shake it a little bit. But however you do it, I don't think it really matters. Some people use video, and then they'll go back into an editing program and look through the stills. Yeah. But what he did was high-speed photography, so I'm not sure if it makes a difference. I don't think it does. It's one of the crazier things that I've seen as far as real pictures of, like, real people and things.
Yeah.
It's just wild,
Yeah, well, and, after looking into Veda Austin, I was primed for this sort of thing, I guess. And then so in looking at a lot of this, I was like, okay, yeah, this is, things we've seen before from her. But over the 50 years, there were a great number of people that he worked with that didn't use water. They used other mediums or whatever and were able to either project their thoughts into the film or they were able to get questions answered via the developed photo. And it's one of those things that's really, it's difficult to replicate because when you're dealing with the quantum field, it's all of the potential realities at once. So I don't know how you would ever do it a second time. I don't think that's possible. And so I think that's one of the difficulties for skeptics is they're like, well, you can't repeat this. And I'm like, well, right, but you shouldn't be able to repeat it. In fact, if you could repeat it, I think I would be less inclined to believe it. If it was exactly the same every time, I don't think that would truly be capturing anything in the quantum field.
I've went through that whole damn website, and there's a lot of information
It's
and a lot of
extensive.
photos, and so it's Hans Kennis, ITC.
Yeah, it's instrumental transcommunication, I think.
Yeah. Go to that, just type that in, Google, and sit there for hours and marvel over the information and the photographs and it's not just his. It's like,
oh yeah,
There's probably by now thousands of people doing this.
Yeah.
But back then, I mean, even as far back as like 1930 or it's been going on a long time. They've been
Right.
trying to do this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And then when digital photography came out, it really kicked it up.
Well, and that's another thing too. You know, you can make all kinds of allowances for the chemicals and the film development process, et cetera. But digital is a little different.
Yeah.
And again, that one guy that was just, you know, taking pictures of the curtain, there was no manipulation between the time that he took the photo and the time that you see what the result is. And he didn't leave that room, and there were cameras on him, and just like, okay, that's really hard to deny.
I mean, we all have the greatest camera. We carry it around with us now.
Yeah.
And we have access to a myriad of editing programs on
Yeah.
our phone.
Yeah.
I mean, you could literally just be in the kitchen cooking soup,
Yeah.
you know, like put the water in the bowl, do a little bit of shake, and then save it for later,
Yeah.
which I'm going to do. But it got my brain sort of reeling because I do that a lot. And I start thinking about things like, you know, cymatics and different things that I hadn't seen on this site
Yeah.
tried, like color filters, colored foil.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, color is a band
Right.
and it would narrow. It seems like it would narrow, but if you're dealing with quantum, there's no narrowing of that. Like,
Well, but there's different effects for the different fields. So like where it narrows in one, it expands in another, et cetera.
yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And I was thinking like, well, what if you put the bowl on it and shook it at different frequencies where it like was a steady sort of.
Yeah. Like if you could put it on something that vibrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But would that make more of a pattern that is like a cymatic thing? Probably.
Well, you know, that's another thing is humans are so predisposed to pattern recognition. That's like one of the primary functions of our brain. And so I think skeptics often will look at this stuff and they're like, well, you're trying to see something. You want to see something. And I guess my rebuttal to that is, well, that's everything though.
Yeah. That's every single thing.
It's every single thing. So of course my intentions are going to color it, period.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, you know, that in the sentence there. It's I know that I am influencing it.
Yeah. I'm influencing it by just being there with it and
Right.
looking at it. So it doesn't matter. I'm not going to stare at a bowl of shaking water, not trying to see something.
Yes, exactly.
I mean,
Well, and if you try to not see something, then you won't see something.
yeah.
That's how that works.
You'll just be more pissed. You'll be like, "Oh, I didn't see anything."
Yeah, I told
Like,
you.
Whatever.
Yeah,
That's boring.
it is boring. Although I see it as further proof of how your intentions shape your reality, I also see it as just proof to me that it is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
You know, whatever it's supposed to be is, but it is performing in the way that it should perform.
Yeah, we don't know what water is. We just don't know. It's the craziest thing on any planet that we know about.
Yeah.
Like, water is the most mysterious thing ever.
Yeah.
And for there to be quantum tunneling in water easily
Right.
is so, like, it's almost like duh.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I don't know if you checked out the part on the site where they did sound experiments. Where they,
The EVP
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really interesting to me too. All the methods that they went to try to both create like a harmonic field or whatever, and then to try to distill it down. And again, I went into that thinking, oh, well, yeah, if you think you're going to hear, you know, someone say hello, or if you listen to a thing trying to find a word, you can listen to it 100 times. You're like, wait, I think they said spaghetti. And, you know, and again, that goes back to the intention thing. But with this, I thought it was really interesting the way they tried to account for distortions, et cetera, and the way they tried to work around that. What struck me is it seemed more like a scientific approach to a lot of this stuff, which I appreciate because, like most people, I don't want to be duped and I don't want to fall for a hoax or whatever. So I like to see that, you know, people are at least trying to figure out, you know, is this really what we're hearing? What's the best way to do this? How can we repeat this, etc.?
Yeah.
I thought that was really neat. I expected to kind of blow it off a little bit.
Yeah. When I first saw the photos, the first thing that entered my mind was, I'd like to do this and capture images, even if I'm making them up. I don't care, because I do that anyway. Like, I have a big thing with pattern recognition and the way that I see stuff. I mean, any kind of patterns, I can see, I see stuff in them, and everybody does. But that in my life is like influenced directly when I was doing, like, screen printing stuff and drawing and painting stuff, was basically just like the ink blot test almost. Like,
Yeah.
And it seems like, oh, well, you're like cheating. I don't think there's no such thing as cheating. I mean, it's just like whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's what Ralph Steadman does, and he's like one of the greatest. But he also has the talent. It's like you don't just like have this thing, It's like you start with a thing, like a blot or a splat, and then you make it into your thing.
Right, yeah.
So I was thinking about that, about some of these pictures, because they look a lot like stuff that I'd like to draw and like to mess with. They're real, like, some of the stuff is like just super out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then some of the pictures, though, are like photographs.
Right.
From 1920.
Yeah.
And it's creepy.
Very.
And really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought some of the really old ones were super creepy. Some of the new ones, some of the digital ones were also pretty creepy too.
Yeah.
And, there is a fair amount of wanting to be scared or creeped out or whatever. And so going into it, like, looking for that. But I didn't. I went into it just like, okay, what's this about? And when I looked at some of those really old ones, I was struck at how, one, they were creepy, and two, I mean, people back then must have thought like that was the devil or something, or thought,
definitely everything was the fucking devil.
Right.
Did you see the one? There's so many.
I know.
But I think it was a water photo, but it looked like this little strip, and there were like maybe 40 people in it. It looked like a family photo or something.
Yeah.
Did you see?
Yeah, I saw that one.
That was crazy, dude.
Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, and okay, so that one in particular, I don't know how you would pull that off, first of all. Like, if you were trying to make a hoax, I don't know how you'd pull that off. But then also, it didn't take a whole lot of imagination, because some of them do. Some of them you're like, well, if I kind of really squint my eyes and think about it, then yeah, I guess that does kind of match. But not that one. And actually not most of them. I mean, there were some that were, I wouldn't have included if it was me as the editor. But
yeah, I think they're just showing the range.
Yeah.
Because some of that stuff was real ethereal, almost like fairies and sprites and gnomes. And some of those pictures, like, I mean, of that were crazy.
Yeah.
And you could discount that because, not very many people probably have seen diva spirits and things like that, like to put it up against.
Yeah.
But I don't know, just me personally, like, I'm like, yeah, I think that's probably what it would look like. I mean, like,
right, yeah.
Just my own little stupid opinion, but, I looked at Brian Froud's books and, like, fairies and stuff, and I'm like, it looks exactly like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that means, but, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
This is just going to be me saying that's pretty cool a lot. So, yeah. You guys are welcome. I'm going to brighten your day.
With coolness. I like how there's no good or bad. There's no, this is, definitely this. I thought the website, even though it's kind of clunky and very, very long, I thought they did a good job of like trying to be impartial and trying not to put too much of their own coloring on it. There wasn't ever like, this looks like Satan or,
Yeah.
I mean, there was, I don't know.
There's a couple where it'll be like upper left, and they'll have, like all that circled and everything. But you kind of have to do that on some of those. They're so faint. You could probably get lucky and get a couple or a few, because some of those are so unbelievable that it doesn't compute.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it looks like you have to be able to look in there and almost get into like a meditative sort of state yourself.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'd be looking at a thing and I would see something and I was like, oh, is that it? And I couldn't tell. And then I would kind of zoom out my focus sort of, and then I would see like this clear, just photographic face.
Oh.
But inside of that face, there was another thing that I was seeing.
Yeah.
And that again goes to everything is contingent upon our looking at it.
Right. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. Like, what does it mean? It doesn't matter. Like,
Right.
even if you knew what it meant, it doesn't. It doesn't do anything
Right.
unless somebody jumps out of there and like is like, "Hey, here's how you build a spaceship."
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, what does it matter?
Yeah. We can theorize about all kinds of things, but until
Yeah.
you can do anything with it, it really doesn't matter.
But it's very awesome.
yeah.
Like, you can't do anything with a painting, but it's
Right.
awesome.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same thing.
So we're done. All right. 25 minutes. Best, fastest one yet.
Wait, we haven't mentioned non-duality yet. We can't.
Oh, shit.
We can't be done.
So, yeah. Actually, well, no, I don't want to get into that. I will get into it. There's a guy who developed the first microprocessor ever. He's a physicist, quantum physicist. He was a professor of physics and did all the crazy shit for just his whole life. Believed the material model, everything. And then one day, in his, I don't know, he was like maybe in his 50s or something, he had it sounds like an out-of-body experience, but it wasn't. He said, like, he got up, went back to bed, energy came shooting out of him, like out of his chest. And he said that it was just pure, radiant joy and peace and love. And he was like, that's not what I called it when it was happening. He's like, I can only reflect on it. But the rest of his life, now, he's like, we have it all wrong. We have it all wrong. Like everything we always say, it's the truth, man. Like, he said, consciousness is first.
Yeah.
It is the foundation.
Right.
There are no physics. There is no math. There's no anything without consciousness.
Right.
Classical physicists look at it like it's a problem to be solved.
Yeah.
They don't look at it like consciousness has to be here for me to solve the problem.
Right. Yeah.
And he's like, well, of course not, because then they couldn't be more important than you.
True.
He
Yeah.
was like, I was one of them.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a problem to solve, to say, hey, look how crazy this problem is that I just solved.
Yeah.
And now I'm higher than you.
Yeah.
That's literally what we're dealing with.
Oh, yeah. Well, so much of the funding is predicated on having an impossible problem with an impossible solution, and you just keep getting grants to write papers on these things that aren't even relevant, really. And it's like the answer chasing the question, but they don't actually have the answer, and they really don't even know what the question is. All they know is, if I keep putting out papers that discuss things that no one's ever going to be able to test, and there's no way to really prove or disprove or whatever, then there are physicists that literally their entire career is just pumping out papers and getting funding and not actually solving anything.
Yeah, if I keep shaking this bowl of water,
Right.
more faces are going to appear in
Right.
it.
Yep.
Okay.
Great.
You want to go get a hamburger? You
Yeah.
want to, like, you
Yeah.
know,
Totally.
and that ties in very nicely, actually. We always talk about, or have talked about, words just explain words. And that's all that's going on here. And I wouldn't even call that a going on because it doesn't explain anything. I've gotten so deep into this that, like, I understand now what nothing is going on really means. Because every word that comes out of my mouth is just basically trying to explain every other word that's about to come out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And that's all that's going on.
Yeah. Right.
And, you know, it's just amazing that we sit in this room, this studio, this space or whatever, and it has absolutely no bearing on it. Whatever words come out of my mouth, it does not change.
Right.
It doesn't change this room. If I say speaker is a bathtub and I'm looking at the speaker, it's still the same thing as what it is. It doesn't do anything. The
Right.
words are the only thing that are changing there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just wild to me, man. And, you know, we had to go off on that side tangent because it wouldn't be a podcast episode if we didn't. We need to put that in
Oh yeah.
from time to time just to
Well, yeah, we gotta keep ourselves.
keep on our toes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we stick with themes, but yeah. So Hans Kennis, the instrumental transcommunication website is very interesting, but also just the different methods that he employed to kind of get at the same thing, which is there are dimensions around us, and you and I have talked about it, like whether you want to call it a dimension or, you know, a different frequency or whatever, they are around us at all times. We are one of the additional dimensions to somebody else's home dimension, for lack of a better term. And if we could figure out how to phase in and out, we could take advantage, or at least, you know, more wholly witness what's going on in those other dimensions. The best part, though, is, and Veda Austin was good at demonstrating this, some of those dimensions have the etheric knowledge, and you can ask it questions and get answers. I think that's really fascinating. There were some examples of that on the site where people had either asked questions, got answers, or they had projected their thoughts onto the photographs. That reminds me of how intentions are energy. To me, it's a photographical representation of that, of taking that intention and that energy and actually putting it into something where you can actually see it, whether it's the, you know, photo or frozen ice or you know, whatever. And I think it's neat that so many people are trying to and have tried to do this and have had some success doing it. It really just reminds me that it's all true. There are all these dimensions around us. There are all of these other goings on that we're not privy to. And so it takes some intellectual humility to recognize that I don't have all the answers. I'm never going to have all the answers. I don't even know the questions to ask. So I need to just be curious and enjoy it, embrace it, or experience it, or whatever you want to say. But I can't let my small mind prevent me from exploring all of those possibilities.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, explaining doesn't contain any answer.
Right.
It never will. So that is the most amazing thing about all of it. It goes back to that microchip guy. He said some of the most profound shit, and it was based in science, and it really ties in well to all of this. They were talking about AI and talking about computers being smarter than humans, all this stuff, and he was like, you don't understand that there's however many trillions of cells in the body, and each cell contains all of the information of the whole body.
Right, yeah.
Right? A computer contains an on and an off, a classical computer.
Yep.
It doesn't know anything but on or off.
Right.
It doesn't even know that.
Right. It doesn't know.
There's no knowing. So he was like, that's the difference between quantum and classical.
Yep.
In quantum, it's all a probability. It can't be measured. Like, it can't be repeated.
Right.
Which is the craziest shit.
Yeah.
He also talks about the like the map and the terrain. You know, I've said it a million times, and I'm just like, I've read it, and I didn't think much about it, and then I started thinking about it, and I was like, oh my God, it's like two worlds we're living in.
Yeah.
We live in the map,
Right.
and the terrain we don't even know how to explore.
Right.
Nothing comes to you and announces itself as whatever you think it is. It's always what you think it is.
Yes.
And there are no boundaries. It's only the boundaries that you think that there are.
Right. Yeah.
So what does that say? It goes back to consciousness. It goes back to the foundation. It goes back to your awakeness. And wherever these ideas, I guess the ideas come from learning, like we've been taught it, and we take ourselves to be the map. And we take everything to be the map. We see a rabbit and we point at it and we go, oh, there's a rabbit. In the terrain of it, in the actuality, the reality of it, that's unknowable.
Right.
And I'm unknowable to myself.
Right.
This doesn't help us as human beings in our stories.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's not going to make anybody feel better. It might make people feel worse. Like whatever. It doesn't matter, though, because you're going to feel better and worse all the time.
Yeah.
It's not about feeling better forever. It's not about being happier all the time. There's no such thing.
Right. Yeah. And it's silly to pursue that,
Yeah,
but it's what a lot of people think they're supposed to do.
exactly.
They're supposed to pursue eternal happiness or something.
Yeah. And he talks about free will is a thing, but it's free will of consciousness. It's not free will of the person.
Right. That is the hardest one, I think, because I've seen a lot of breakdowns on how you can't really say that anyone has free will. And I agree with that. However, the conscious is different. And that's the thing that has the free will.
It's what people call the will of God. And I don't like that term because I don't like the idea of a God. But it's just the will of what is.
Right.
It's like, did it happen? Yeah. Okay. Is it gone? Yeah. Immediately.
Yeah.
It's the will of what is.
Right.
You can argue with it until you're dead in all of your lives. Like, it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
You'll never figure it out. It's not even a problem.
Yeah.
It's weird how everything we talk about kind of can be filtered down into this. I mean, it makes sense since everything is consciousness. Like,
Right.
you know, everything we can talk about is that. I like it when it naturally leads here because even though it's not about the topic, it gives me a refresher like every time, you know?
Well, it helps me to see it from another angle or another, like it just adds more context to my thoughts about consciousness, you know? So it's like, well, here's this other thing. And this also is a illustration or an example of, you know, consciousness or whatever.
Yeah. It's like whatever words you're saying, whatever words come out of your mouth is the will of what is happening. And you can't go back.
Yeah.
It's quantum. You can't repeat it.
No. Yeah.
No memory is repeatable. Every memory that you have is like a brand new, fresh sheet of paper.
Yeah.
And it claims to have had millions of the same memory.
Right. Yeah.
But that's brand new.
Yep. Every time.
Every time.
Every single time.
Yeah.
That's another thing that's really interesting about when you talk about consciousness and quantum and stuff like that, thinking about how neuroscience works and how there's so much that we have learned, especially just in the past 50 years, about how opinions are formed literally, like chemically and electrically in the brain. We now have observed opinions forming. We've observed minds changing when someone's presented with new information and they change it. So we know all of the processes within the brain. Well, we know many more processes within the brain that do these functions. However, we are never, ever going to see the consciousness center, and we're never, ever going to see the consciousness receiver or whatever it is, because that isn't part of the brain.
Well, I would also add that it's because we are consciousness.
Exactly.
We are the looker.
Right.
We are the seer of everything that is known. We are the knower of everything known. And we cannot be known but only to ourselves. We can only know ourselves that we are conscious. No one else can know that for us. And when I say us, I only mean consciousness as one thing. So everything is conscious. Everything is consciousness. So what we think of as a lot of different personalities and people, that's the thing that moves.
Yeah.
The one thing that doesn't move is consciousness. And
Right.
that's the one thing that's looking out of your eyes.
Right.
And it's hearing your voice.
Yeah.
And it is feeling your head move side to side. And you should really, not should, if you want to follow this line and freak yourself out, you really can. It takes a lot of concentration, but you really can. You trace the minutia of appearances, of happenings, and you realize that I am aware of that. And it keeps getting more and more minute. It's like going back to Douglas Harding, he's just like, point to yourself,
Yeah.
and that's like the best thing ever.
Oh, yeah.
But then people like, Greg Good, they go into like the minutia of it. Like, okay, well now I figured that out. That's wild. But I still feel like, when I turn my head, I'm turning my head, and I feel like I'm doing things, and I feel like
Yeah.
the room, it moves around, and I feel this pressure behind my eyes and all this stuff. And there's like all these things that you can separate and tweeze out
Yeah.
and be like, oh, wait, no. Am I pressure?
Right. Yeah.
And you're like, no, I'm not pressure. I'm aware of the pressure.
Yeah.
And then you're like, am I movement? Like when I turn my head and the whole scene moves, am I that? Because if I was that, I wouldn't be noticing it.
Right.
So it's like all these little tricks,
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways.
The superposition is an interesting phenomena, I guess, for lack of a better term. And that's essentially like what you're talking about when you're saying that you had just said it a minute ago. I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, I do that a lot.
I know.
I know.
Regardless, it is what seems like opposites at the same time being the same thing. That's how quantum works.
Yeah.
So, like, yes.
It's on and off.
It's on and off.
Right.
It's observed and unobserved.
Right.
But another interesting thing, when a person wants to really think about, like, how they can't trace the thought back to the original thought, or, they can't get any further back. They can't get to the beginning. This is just really interesting to me. So before, we've probably even talked about this, whenever you go to like reach for a cup of coffee that's sitting on the desk or whatever, before you have the thought, I'm going to reach for that cup of coffee, your body is already beginning the process of moving your arm and shifting your focus to the coffee and then outstretching your hand to grasp it. All of that starts before the thought, I'm going to get the coffee. And what's crazy to me is we believe that we are in control of this package that we are in, and we're not at all.
We're not even in the package.
We're not even in the package.
Yeah.
The meat suit is just doing its thing,
Yeah.
and the consciousness is wholly separate from it.
Yeah. Immovable,
Right.
unknowable, no attributes,
Yeah.
no dimension.
Right.
All dimensions are known by consciousness.
Right.
I mean, that is like, you can't use your mind to understand that.
Yeah.
The mind is understood by you just being awake.
Right. And there's no consciousness mirror that you can go and see what consciousness looks like or whatever.
No.
There's no way to quantify it. There's no way to qualify it. It is a true act of faith in believing that consciousness is its thing.
Yeah. And in order to be it or to recognize yourself as it, you know it by everything that you're not.
Yeah.
It's a process of elimination.
Yes.
And I promise you, the feelings that you will have will be something you've never felt before at times. It'll be disorienting at times. There's so many things that can happen to you because your belief system is so strong.
Yeah.
And it feels so concrete that when it gets shaken, it's just like, it shakes your foundation for real.
Well, that and it requires so much ego depletion or destruction or whatever. Like you really have to let go of the fantasy that you know anything and that you are anything.
Yeah, but it's like you have to just see the urge. I think of it as like a primal urge or something. It's like whenever somebody's talking and you want to say something real bad, it's like that. And you're like that all the time. It's always like, ooh, right?
Yeah.
And it feels like that. I think that's what the ego or whatever we call the personality feels like. It feels like an urge or like maybe like a bundle of nerve energy or something. It just feels like something solid, but you go looking for it and it is not solid and it's nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
You'll never find it
No.
because it's not real.
Right.
And I was gonna say something really cool about something, but I totally forgot. Yeah, I don't know how we got on consciousness again, but I do know. Because it's really all we want to talk about.
That's true.
Or it's all I want to talk about whenever we start talking about it.
Yeah.
But, you can bet your ass I'm going to get a bowl of water and shake that shit and take some pictures of it.
I think you should.